I'm Marshall Dunn, and welcome to the Heart House Radio Podcast. As the world continues to change, grow and evolve, exploring deeper meaning, creativity, collaboration, play, and fulfillment are at the center of a new world. To me, it's a journey into the path of the heart and the soul's expression. So join me in conversation each week with amazing human beings who have the courage to live and breathe the story of their own hearts. Your journey to expanded self-awareness and connection starts right here, right now. Reclaiming your kingdom. This is the theme for this week's show as I sat down with conscious masculine mentor Stefanos Sifandos. Talk about the real deal. Now here's a man that's truly turned his life around and tapped into his essence and really embraced who he is. As Stefanos will tell you, he was living a lie, and through a big wake-up call had to face the hard, dark truth of this reality. But instead of falling into the shadows of addiction and self-loathing, he made the decision to reclaim his kingdom and learn how to truly be a real man, a man of integrity, a man of deep spiritual connection and embodiment, and a man of service. Stefanos is a guy's guy. He's a fellow Aussie and a big inspiration to men in particular, including myself, who have been unfaithful in relationships, have had anger, rage issues, and have drunk maybe a little bit too much along the way. So in this episode, listen to how Stefanos has shifted and healed his life, and take stock that it's never too late to change and that we are always changing and evolving. So here's to staying true to yourself and walking the path of the heart. This is Heart House Radio Podcast in conversation with Stefanos Sifandos. Hey, what's up, co-creators and allies? Welcome back to the show. This is Heart House Radio, and today, my friends, I have a great guest on the show, as always, but today I'm super excited because we've got a man in the house, not just a man, we've got an Aussie man in the house. So I'm going to introduce you to him right now. His name is Stefanos Sifandos. He facilitates transformational growth through neuro-empowerment practices and integration of spiritual praxis and Western psychology to improve and enhance the quality of your relationships. He's doing amazing work. He's an advocate of real masculinity. He is obsessed with the sacred union and a student of Vedanta. And we are here today to talk about reclaiming your kingdom and digging into his story and pulling out all his wisdom and insight. Stefanos, welcome to the show, mate.
Hey, brother. Pleasure and honor to be here. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, not a problem. So it is nice to have an Aussie guy on the show, and it's interesting that your work has revolved around working with men, reclaiming your kingdom, and I think as for Aussie blokes especially, we can grow up in these confines of a bit of a distorted view of what masculinity is and can be.
Yeah.
So I wanted to start from, way back when, where it all began. What was your experience like as a kid growing up in Australia, as an Australian male? And when we think about the term masculinity?
Well, I grew up as an Australian male with a Greek father and Italian mother. And so I was a first generation Australian, and I was born in Australia, but we went over to Greece for a few years. And my first language was actually Greek. And then we came back to Australia, and I had to go to pre-language and learn how to speak English, for lack of a better term, properly again. And we'd go back and forth to Greece and to be with family there. My father really tried to make it work there economically. It was just very, very challenging at that time for different reasons, of course, socioeconomically and geopolitically. And to answer your question with respect to my childhood, growing up in Australia was, for the larger part, really hard, man, and very isolating. I grew up in a physically violent, volatile, and emotionally abusive household, and that added to the isolation I felt at school. I didn't feel I belonged anywhere. I didn't belong in Australia. I didn't belong in Greece. I wanted to be in Greece. I wanted to be in Australia. It was just, I felt very torn as a child, very, very isolated. And that was my perception of reality then. And in saying that, there were some really beautiful times that I remember, beautiful memories I remember with my grandparents even with my father, and he was quote unquote the source of much pain. But there were some beautiful memories scattered there. For the large part, it was just really challenging, and I felt very alone as a kid. And as I grew up, as I hit my teens, and hormones started flooding through me, and I started becoming a man, so to speak, developing into adulthood. I took all that pent up frustration and that density of anger that I was experiencing, that rigidity and that agitation and the rage. I had rage, man. I had rage, and I outlashed into the world. So instead of being bullied, didn't really become a bully, but I definitely carried characteristics of being a bully, because I was just always trying to defend myself and protect myself, coming from fear. And I was just reliving my childhood in my teens and my early 20s, always fighting, hitting the street, punching on, alcohol, just being violent and just being so frustrated, man. At the drop of a pin, I would lose my shit.
Yeah.
And just not connected to myself in that way. And just I wasn't dealing with the pain. I wasn't dealing with the trauma that I experienced. That was the short of it.
Yeah. And what was the, I guess the most dominant, and by the way, are you wearing bracelets right now? There's a bit of shaking going on over there.
Oh, is there?
Yeah.
No, I'm not. But let me just sit differently. Maybe that would help. Is that better?
That's better now. Yeah.
Cool.
Totally.
Yeah, it was just the way I was sitting. I was just rubbing on my jumper.
But what was the biggest inner critic, or what was the voice of obstruction that was kind of driving you at that time?
Driving me to behave in the way that I was in terms of being violent.
Yeah, the frustration, what was the inner critic telling you about yourself? What was the story?
That I'm not good enough, that that I need to be careful with what I show the world. So I would lay a mask upon mask upon mask around what I thought the world wanted me to be, my friends, family, any romantic partnerships. Don't get me wrong, there was elements of me that were truthful, that were coming through, but for the large part, man, it was appeasing others, and that just fueled the frustration and fueled the disconnection that I was feeling within myself. And so it was just more outlash and more. And once the violence diminished and I stopped fighting per se, and I had more, control over that, it was just these emotional outbursts that I would have, and they were unchecked and unregulated, and still coming from fear and trauma. And so the stories were, I'm not good enough. I'm not smart enough. I've got to do more. I'm lazy. Anything and everything. You name it. I'm not fit enough. I have to go deeper into my fitness. And I was a fanatic back then. And I'm still very much into health and wellness. That will never die within me. That's always a part of me. I strongly resonate with what Socrates has said and what Plato has said around. It's a complete shame for any man, particularly to not know the limitations or the perceived limitations of his physical strength and his physical capacity. Taking our bodies to that place is very important. And that was an outlet for me as well. That was a healthy outlet, but I even made that unhealthy by being excessive in that space and using it as a tool for forgetting and a tool for avoiding my stuff, my inner conflict and turmoil and pain and fear and suppressed trauma.
Yeah. Well, I mean, mate, physical, whether you call it exercise or just being in your body as a guy, or for any human being, is so important. But I'm interested in that time before I go ahead, as you were going through, this tough stuff and you're suppressing and bottled up emotions, was there anything that you dreamt about of becoming as a teenager? What were your big inspirations? And do you have dreams of turning this into something, or did you have something that was a buried dream that you never allowed to come forth?
Yeah, it's an astute question. I did, man. So when I was a very young boy, I would tell my mum I wanted to be the Secretary General of the United Nations, right? and the reason for that was because I was experiencing so much disharmony in my own life, and I was witnessing all this poverty and war and everything else in the world, and hunger and disease and famine, and just inequity in the world. And I thought, well, if I can be the United Nations Secretary General, I can fix all that. In my naivety as a child, that's what I thought. As I grew up, I realised geopolitically that there was somewhat of a farce, and the corruption and the corporatocracy that was running rampant through the UN was really not going to serve what I wanted. But I always had these dreams around being a global leader and coming from a place of, as I matured, especially the last few years, not fixing anything, but providing the world with a new concept of reality. And so those dreams that I had when I was a young child, they actually haven't changed really now. I still see myself as someone that can contribute to the world in a very meaningful way, whether it be through a clear understanding of the way we relate to each other at an individual level, or providing new social systems for how we interact at a more collective and globally collective level, sociocultural, socioeconomic, geopolitical, etc. And so that's very important to me, and it's something that really inspires me and drives me to provide new blueprints for reality and for what we can be in this world. And that really hasn't changed from when I was a young child. It's just the way I relate to it now doesn't come from a place of wounding and pain because of my own isolation and fear, but comes from a place of deep inspiration. It's something that I wake up and I'm naturally aspirated for it. That's just where I'm at.
Well, that's beautiful, and I'm sure there's a difference between inspiration and motivation.
Always.
I feel like inspiration, there is no motivation needed. You're just out of bed doing it.
It's just push-pull, man. You pull inspiration from me. You pull deeply towards something. It's effortless. Where motivation is, it's more of a mental construct, and it's more cognitive, and you've got to push yourself towards it. So it requires more energy, output, effort, and it's short-lived. And it's because it's not grounded in sincere values. It's not grounded in alignment with one's true, authentic essence and one's true core self. That's the distinction I make between that motivation, inspiration.
Yep, mate, I'm so on board with that definition. That's how I see it. So as you've moved out of your teenage years and, into your early 20s and whatnot, like, and moving into your 20s, what were some of the pivotal experiences that started to, I guess, unlock this, new direction or new way of being in the world?
I delved deeper into my own spirituality and sense of connectedness. I delved deeper into study as well and research. I delved deeper into understanding, but it was all, I don't want to say it was superficial. It was more intellectual and cognitive. Even the spiritual practices were more of a ticking a box of doing. But but that still helped. It still made a difference. But what really transmuted where I was to where I am and how I moved through that was being in a relationship where I was highly unfaithful a number of years ago, and in most of my relationships really, and I was unfaithful and she found out, and that for me was a catalyst for a deeper transformation, because witnessing the pain that my actions had contributed to the way she was feeling was very, very confronting for me, and it brought up a lot of stuff, man, a lot of old stuff with my family dynamics and my parents, and it brought a lot of that to the surface. Even though I'd been in personal growth from a very young age, I not that I'd tinkered with it, I had gone deep but never deep enough. And so at that point I made a decision to go really deep. I fully committed, no matter what the outcome was, whether it was suicide, mental asylum, death, whatever it was, I was going to commit to going deep into equilibrating and neutralizing these constructs that were driving me as a person that really wasn't in alignment with who I truly was. Yeah. And so seeing myself from that place and going through that journey was very revealing and liberating for me at the same time, and very confronting and very challenging and painful as well. But the substitute was remaining ignorant. I just wasn't I wasn't prepared to continue to do that.
Yeah, it takes a lot of courage to be able to sit with that and make that word, the commitment. Because I think that's, for a lot of people, we struggle with that, whether it's in our relationships or even the commitment to stay true to yourself in a world where everyone's telling you what to do, or even in a family where everyone's telling you what to do. So much noise and distraction. Just to stay true to that is, it's tough. But I'm glad you did, because you come out on the other side and you got something to talk about.
Yeah, well, that was one of my options. I said to myself, I'm going to come out of this and be able to inspire myself to continue to live a life that's worth living, that's in alignment, and in some capacity potentially inspire others as well.
Yeah. So I assume it would be a matter of really feeling these things that were coming up. Like, were there any teachers or modalities that you specifically used to help you move through this stuff?
No, yeah, many teachers, man. I saw spiritual teachers, psychologists, psychiatrists, without the medication though, just to get different perspectives.
Right. This is full
Um,
commitment from you.
oh yeah,
Absolutely.
counselors,
Yeah.
spiritual healers,
Yeah.
mentors, coaches, gurus per se, Eastern wisdom, Eastern philosophy. I moved into different modalities around, I mean, I can't. So, for example, I'm trying to think now, there was Reiki, there was bone therapy, there was,
What did you love the most in terms of what do you feel like you gave you the biggest kind of breakthrough?
I did spiral dynamics. That was very helpful. I'm obviously going through some of the specific Western psychology. The Eastern mysticism was the best, was the most profound for me. What was aligned with Vedanta, particularly Advaita Vedanta, was very aligned with me, and it was a dual form of Vedantic teaching. Even the Buddhism as well was very peaceful for me. Different expressions of yoga as well. I went into. I'm just trying to think at that time what else I did. I did some funky stuff as well around ancient Egyptian spiritual methodology as well. I went into family constellation work too.
Oh
I went
yeah,
into
plenty of that.
Imago work. Yeah, I went into Psych K. I went into hypnosis, and I'm qualified in all those as well. I went into NLP.
Yeah. Well, you've covered it all. I mean, how old are you now?
I'm 37 now.
Yeah, you're my age. Yeah. So, and how long was this process for you?
It was a number of years, man. I spent a lot of time on my own in solitude, meditating, reading, reading a lot of Ken Wilber's stuff as well. And again, other ancient Eastern mystics and various forms of books, of course, and processes and other methods for improving, evolving one's mind-body connection, evolving one's spirituality per se. Looked at different religious texts as well. I went deep, man, for a number of years. I mean, I'm still deep in it. It's just that the place that I come from now is far more, grounded, integrated, and embodied. But it's taken years to get to that point. And the reality is, man, I did a lot of foundation work from a very young age as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And did you find yourself after that reality check with your relationship there? Did you enter into another relationship, in the near future, or you literally took time out for a few years from relationships?
I took deliberate time out and celibacy as well after that particular relationship for about I was 12 to 18 months, and then I got into a relationship, and then that relationship ended. But that ended as a conscious uncoupling. It was a far more mature relationship. And then I took about 18 months off that one. Again, very deliberate from the moment that ended, and really went deep into self again. That was another catalyst for me, actually, but in a different way, not from a place of, wow, I've got to equilibrate a lot of this unchecked wounding. It was going deeper into the layers of myself. That was a very profound time for me as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And what was the type of, I guess, in your words and for you, like what was the type of freedom that you were longing for? What did you want life to look like?
Well, what I wanted life to feel like and look like was to not be hindered by my external environment so much. In other words, not be dictated to by what was happening around me, but rather choose to respond in a particular way. In other words, have greater mastery over my internal faculties. And that's something that I work on and that I'm aware of on a daily and regular basis, and something that I'm becoming, like anything, what we pay attention to, it grows, right? And so that's growing within me because I'm allowing myself to be more profound in that space and more connected in that area as well.
So I guess that ties to the word reclaiming your kingdom, right?
Yeah, reclaiming your kingdom. That's right. And that was a big thing for me. I looked at my masculinity. I looked at how I was behaving as a man in the world, how I was showing up to myself and to others. And I looked at that and I thought, I really need to reclaim my own kingdom, my inner sanctum. and I went about doing that. So, and in those times of celibacy, and in those times of not just celibacy, but just those times of just minimizing feminine contact and being within my own masculine, being within my own manhood, in my own self, and just being more not isolated, but in solitude, because there's a difference, of course, and purposely being in solitude. I refrain from any form of masturbation or ejaculation, and that seed retention that was taking place, I transmuted that into deep creativity. And I produced so much of the work that I've created today and continue to create today. Some of my best programs and principles and models and so forth and frameworks. I like to build academic models. I have an academic background as well, and I like to build academic models, but with a pragmatic application in real world life for people to actually use and say, well, this is a principle, this principle of let's take being a resilient warrior. What does that actually mean conceptually? But what does that mean pragmatically in my life? How can it benefit me? How can it benefit others? And then I would go deeper into those practices, and I would come up with these concepts and ideas, and I would actually practice them and be them and live them. And I would notice that I was practicing these for actually years, but I just wasn't deliberate with it, and I wasn't purposeful with it. So when I became purposeful and deliberate, the essence and the potency of that principle or that application in the real world, it completely elevated. And so I would always practice, and I continue to do that. Practice what I preach, or practice what I speak to, what I develop.
Yeah, and that's, I guess, the hardest part as a teacher, right? To be able to walk the walk and not just talk it.
Yeah.
So, mate, you mentioned before, like a lot of time in solitude, and how did you have, as you're going through this as well, like a support system, close mates, or a community? Because I know even what you offer now, like the community aspect is obviously a big part of it. So yeah, just interested for you, like, did you have like close mates or a support group that was?
I did. That was a crucial part. And in hindsight, I probably could have leveraged them even more, and they wanted me to, and I didn't. And that was part of my journey, and that's fine. I learned what I learned from that. But yes, I've developed a 6-step cyclical process for dealing with pain, challenge, adversity, etc., the unknown or difficulty. And part of that is, definitely one of the steps or stages is having a regular support system, whatever that looks like, whether it's a counselor, a psychologist, a mentor, a guide, a spiritual guide, a healer, a friends, family, whatever it is, but just have, a partner, having someone or a group of people that you can rely on to find reprieve from the spiral of whatever you're moving through.
Yeah, no, it's super important. I think that's where, coming back to guys, and the stats will tell you, like, especially as people, I think, get older as well, guys especially can become more isolated.
Yes.
Women, for some reason, they get together and they, they seem to kind of have it figured out. They're good at talking about their feelings and what's going on in their lives. Whereas, especially, us Aussie guys, we tend to, stay in our own little shells and kind of deal with it ourselves. And, that's one of the reasons I'm sure that, even suicide rates, 40 plus, they still haven't kind of gone anywhere. Lower, they're kind of risen, if anything, I think by 10%.
Yeah.
Just an important aspect of it. What did I want to ask you around is reclaiming your kingdom? Like, what are in all the study that you've done and all the inner work that you've done on yourself, like what are some of the foundational pillars around reclaiming your kingdom as a guy that's maybe just fallen away from himself?
Wow, that's a really good question. So I've essentially developed two major models on masculinity, and so when I look at those models, and when I look at what does it mean to be a man who, so what can it mean for a man that's fallen by his own wayside, that has lost touch with the truth of who he is, that is disconnected from what matters to him most? There's a number of principles and practices that are essential for that man for him to be able to learn more about who he truly is, right? And so part of that comes down to, we'll call it leadership. Leadership is, and this is one of the principles in the first model, in the 8 principle model, is leadership, and leadership of self. And I call this sovereign leadership. And I've actually developed, this is one of my earlier models that I developed. It was a model around sovereign leadership and all of that entails. And that entails a number of tenets actually around that. But leadership is so important for man, and there's various aspects of this. So the first part is leadership of heart. How can a man actually come from his heart? How can he act from his heart? How can he offer his heart to the world? And what does that actually look like for him? And so we go deep into that in the Reclaim Your Kingdom. And what does a contemporary man's leadership look like and feel like? And so when we come from that place, we begin to realize that your leadership deeply speaks to this ability to be our own man and be responsible for ourselves and give to the world in an equitable way. And so the 5 aspects of leadership that I look at are heart-based leadership, sovereign leadership, which is leading ourselves, leading by example, leading from authentic truth, and leading with purposeful clarity. Now, these are virtues and these are characteristics, of course. And if we are to be leaders that can be admired, respected, and be inspirational, we must learn how to be open, grounded, and trustworthy men. And so when you're asking about what does a man do when he's lost, it's about coming into self. It's about realizing the value and the worth that a man brings to the world from who he is, his birthright of being him. So to be this type of man, we must know ourselves, understand our needs, honor what it means to be a healthy and empowered masculine man. And essentially we need to build rapport and trust with ourselves and others. So we begin with ourselves and we learn how to expand our leadership stance outwardly towards our families, our teams, our communities, and so forth. But we must first focus on our immediate tribe, so our primary in-group. And so again, why do we do that? Because we get this sense of identity from our primary in-group. We've evolved that way. That's how men particularly have evolved. So we identify with discernment who we are, our identity, and how we define ourselves against what matters most to us. And what happens is there are so many people, it's easier for the ego to see outside of itself and inside of itself. So when we surround ourselves with men that we're proud to be with, this is why social cohesion is so important. This is why having solid men and people around us is so important. We are able to identify and develop a deeper sense of self. Now, I'm not talking about codependency, I'm talking about interdependency. So it's a fruitless task trying to be all-inclusive as a leader. Our brain can't comprehend 7.5 billion people, right? So we have to look at our primary in-group and develop a tight-knit network of people. So that's part of what we need to do, and that's what part of forms leadership. That's one of the tenets of the first model of masculinity, the introductory model of masculinity. Yeah. I can keep going with 7 other principles and tenets.
No, it's great. It's I think, and people are going to be able to want to help themselves as well. There's people that kind of, you throw support and love at them, but at the end of the day, and ideas and advice. But at the end of the day, you can take someone to the well of healing. They've got to be able to stand up and want to reclaim their kingdom as well. What are you seeing in the guys that are showing up in your groups? What are kind of are there any common themes that dudes seem to be struggling with these days the most?
Yeah. Oh, massively, man. Massive. And you know what? There's so many. Yeah. There's honestly so many. I have a private Facebook group called The Conscious Man. Yeah. And there's 1,300 men in there or so. And it's a strong group, man. It's very interactive. It's an amazing group. And, the pain points around self-worth, pain points around not being understood, pain points around not having freedom in their world, not being able to make the choices they want to make, pain points around their own identity, pain points around age and health. That's a big pain point actually for so many men. Like they're getting older and they're feeling purposeless in their lives and they're feeling they're just not happy in their bodies. And I'm not talking about an aesthetic. They don't feel healthy and well in their bodies. Big pain point as well. Pain points around confidence. Literally not having confidence in their ability to communicate with people, in their ability to generate ideas, live in their purpose. They're just feeling empty. That's so many pain points, man. That's a lot.
No, there is. And the question that comes up for me sometimes is, looking at the world right now, it is, it can be a really tough place to be for a guy, and especially with the I hear your take on this. With the wave of women stepping into more their power and wanting to have it all, so to speak, whether that's the career and living out their dharma, whatever it is that looks like outside of, say, the traditional home environment, the nurturer archetype. Do you feel like men, in a sense, have become powerless in a way? Like it's the tides have turned too much the other way, and now I think maybe we're learning to kind of find a middle ground. Do you know what I mean?
I do know what you mean, and my response to that is, I hear what you're saying, and I resonate as well. And so my response to that is that if we're choosing to be powerless, it's simply because of that, because we're choosing to be powerless. Right. If we're threatened by a woman or the feminine rising into power, that's something that we need to deeply look at as men. And it doesn't mean that we're weak. It means that we have an opportunity to redefine our own sense of masculinity and step into healthier versions of cooperative power and collaborative power. Because essentially we're collaborative beings, we're cooperative beings. We only need to look to nature for that. Yes, there's elements of competition, inter-group and intra-group as well. Competitions, whether it be with animals and humans and tribes and societies and so forth. And competition can be healthy. But essentially, if we're being threatened by the rise of feminine power or female power or both, for that matter, then there's a, for lack of a better term, a deficit in ourselves, or there's a pain point or a trauma that we're not addressing in ourselves. So as men, we actually have an opportunity, and this is a perspective, right? We have an opportunity to step into greater levels of healthy power and meet those women where they're at, and essentially give them something to be inspired by as well. And so we can inspire each other, essentially. That's my immediate response to that.
So do you think that we're almost like redefining archetypes? We're like remolding archetypes and creating new archetypes?
Yeah, well, yes and no. So we're actually bringing back, if we allow ourselves to, we're bringing back the healthy aspects of traditional archetypes, such as the king archetype and the warrior archetype, the lover archetype, the magician archetype, and there's other masculine archetypes as well. But they're four major ones that are quite popular and prominent in today's world in terms of gender dynamics, but also in terms of socialization as well. And so what we're doing is we're bringing back healthy archetypes. So in my program, Reclaim Your Kingdom, in the mastermind version, which is the second part, which is a 4-month mastermind that follows the 8-week immersion, we deeply speak to chivalry, and I bring back chivalry in a contemporary context. And so it's not necessarily, it is a redefinition per se, but it's actually really just owning the traits of chivalry and bringing them into modern times. And what does that application look like? But it's still honoring the healthy aspects of chivalry and where they've come from. And so the reason why chivalry was created and why chivalry needs to come back into power for the masculine, particularly in contemporary times as well. So it's, yes, a redefinition of archetypes, and it's bringing back the healthy aspects of those archetypes, integrating them into our own being as men.
Interesting. No, these are very wise words. I'm liking this conversation. There's so much to unpack here. I just think, sometimes it's it's a very exciting time to be alive with so much opportunity and potential. But the other side of it as well, I can see how guys, and even myself included, have been times where I've really had to come back to the foundational elements of, what's important to me, how do I want to live, what's exciting to me, who are the people I want to surround myself with, and then looking at, where am I really giving my power away, and why do I keep tripping up all the time in this particular arena, and what am I unwilling to see differently? So in that regard, and with everything that's going on, especially if you live in a big city, it's busy, it's hectic, we've got mouths to feed and clothes to put on their back and all the, the day-to-day stuff. And then you're listening to all the noise and distraction of, people telling you what you should be doing and how to approach things. I think you mentioned solitude before. I can imagine that would have been one of the best things you could have done for yourself. And as much as the community aspect is so important, like I've found in my life that, the solitude moments have been where the real call it intimacy with yourself has been developed. But I think that's the greatest fear for a lot of guys as well, is to sit in a room with their own thoughts. That fucking freaked the shit out of people. Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's an interesting time that we're living in. Let's put it that way.
It is.
Yeah, it is. So, mate, what's this? So, what's the vision that you have with Reclaim Your Kingdom and some of these other models, and also the vision for your own life? What's the next phase of Stefanos? Where's it going?
So the vision for Reclaim Your Kingdom is to definitely develop a global tribe of men that are just really sacred in their own being and willing to do the work and willing to do the work for themselves and for their communities and for their tribe, their own families and so forth, and just and know that they have a legitimate framework for evolving healthy masculinity in contemporary times. And they know they have a band of brothers that are supporting them from afar, wherever they may be. And there's obviously there's an in-person physical component to that. In addition to that, is Reclaim Your Kingdom as a journey and as a program to also be deeply connected to other groups as well. Like I'm connected to, there's a group here in Los Angeles, K4. There's another men's group, Sacred Sons, that I play. I'm really deeply involved in as well. And these guys are doing amazing. We are all doing amazing things as a collective in the communities. And so I've got part of that vision is to merge as well and not be this lone wolf. That shit doesn't fly anymore, bro.
And that's the thing sometimes when you're in this space as well. Like for example, I've just finished this program in this cohort at Columbia with 50 healers, and they they're such a powerful group, but yet everyone in a way is kind of going out on by themselves. And I feel like, why don't we just pick your core group and like start working in collaboration with each other as opposed to just trying to go out there and do it ourselves. Can be really tricky. So you're already making. You've been in the States now, not too long. Is that right?
Yeah, I've been in the States since August last year.
Okay, so have you heard of Everyman as well? The Everyman platform?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I reached out to him. I had a conversation with him a few weeks ago, actually.
You speak to? Was it Owen Marcus or the other guy?
The other gentleman. I can't remember his name now.
Yes.
Yes.
I mean, it's great that you're getting involved with these platforms, because I was going to say, like, since moving to a new country, new life, etc., have you found your core tribe, and did you find it pretty quickly?
That's actually an interesting conversation. No, not really, and that was tough for me, actually, man. Not because I struggle making friends in any capacity. I mean, I have a good tribe now, and I have a bit of a scattered tribe actually across the US. But I went through another personal deep transformation last year alongside my beloved Christine whilst being here, because I purposely decided to engage in some up-leveling work, psychosomatic and psychosexual work, and sexual somatic work. And that was a 3-month intensive, man. And so I spent a lot of time preparing for that, being in that, and then recovering from that per se. So, and whilst I was still building business, getting my green card, building a relationship with my beloved, like there was a lot going on. And so, and still wanting to maintain my physical health. And so creating physical tribe wasn't a priority, even though it probably needed to be. It wasn't a priority because I just didn't have the internal or the external space. And once I cleared that, and I had so much spaciousness and freedom in myself from that journey that I purposely put myself through and with, bro, I'm now really connecting to awesome men. I'm in an excellent mastermind here in Los Angeles. He's a good friend of mine as well. And Christine's friends are amazing, and they're now my friends. And so really opened up to that. So it's starting to build that tribe. But I have an epic tribe in Australia, man. Epic. I have brothers in Australia that are just the bomb, And so, I purposely attract good people in my life because I make it a priority in my life.
Yeah, no, and you know what? You move into a new city and you're undergoing that type of, transformation. It takes typically, they say, a couple of years to kind of just find your feet and have, career, relationships, friends, everything kind of set up. So I think there's the level of patience that you can have with yourself as well. So
absolutely.
I'm interested as well to ask you now, like how do you these days really explore your inner world? Do you have any kind of morning routines and evening as well, whether that's through meditation or surfing or whatever it is, where you kind of tap in? How do you explore your inner world?
Man, I mean, that's a great question. There's various ways that I do that. So I'm definitely a student of Vedanta and Advaita Vedanta, and so I immerse myself in that ethos, that philosophy, that way of being. It's essentially a path of knowledge and shattering ignorance within self and within one's reality. I mean, I can go through my morning routine with you if you like.
Yeah, I think for the listeners, just give us a taste.
It's a 6 or 7 step process for me, or stage process, and it begins with the evening. And so I'm not completely strict with this, but I'm pretty on point with it most of the time. The evening is really all devices ideally off by about 9:30, and then there's some reading time and connection time with my beloved, whatever that looks like, and then sort of in bed between 10 and 11 p.m. I do, about 10:30. Well, when I wake up, it varies, man. Anywhere from could be 5:45 to 6:30, something like that. It just depends what my practices are and what my workload is the next day. But generally, my morning practice is quite deliberate. And I go to the toilet, I release. In the morning, I have a couple of big glasses of water. I'll sit in a meditation practice. It could be some breath work as well that's usually involved in that. So some form of breath work, some form of stillness practice as well. So there's four elements there. Then there'll be some reading that I'll do as well. And then there'll be some sometimes writing. Depends. The writing, not so often these days, but and again, just depends on where I'm at, but definitely some reading, and then a movement practice. And then I get into my entrepreneurial day, or the way that I serve. And that's generally my morning practice. And again, it varies depending on what cycle I'm in. I mean, last year, for example, I spent 3 months doing a 2-hour Kundalini yoga practice every morning for 3 months. Did not skip a day. It was literally anywhere from an hour and 30 minutes to 2 hours and 20 minutes. It was a long practice, and so it just depends what I'm doing. That's generally my morning practice.
Yeah, mate, you're full throttle with this, and I love it. I love your commitment. Well, that's how that's the commitment to the path. And I think after reading some of your stuff, that was the thing that you were probably sick of. Is not committing to any one thing. Whether that was relationships, and as they say, your greatest voids become your highest values.
Yes, they do.
Yeah. Well, mate, it's awesome that you're doing this type of work. I want to thank you. I know you're busy, and we're going to wrap up here in a second. But I can tell you, I'm totally resonating with everything you're saying. Hopefully, a lot of the guys that are listening as well, because it is such important work. There's a lot of people out there that are, slipping and sliding all over the place, and feeling a little bit discontent, discombobulated inside. When's the next Reclaim Your Kingdom open? And if people want to work with you elsewhere, how do they do that?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, brother. I really appreciate that opportunity. Reclaimyourkingdom.com. That is available, and that commences July 17th. Intakes. I'm just wrapping up the last Reclaim Your Kingdom now. The next one commences July 17th. And the reason why it's not commencing sooner is there's a couple of reasons, but one is because I'm doing some after work with this particular Reclaim Your Kingdom. Okay. So July 17th, reclaimyourkingdom.com, that commences, and intakes and applications are starting for that pretty much now, actually. And I'm very excited about this because the July 17th is the first time I'm actually teaching this new 8-week or 8-principle model. I did it in reverse, man. I did the more advanced teaching first, and I've been running that one. And now that I've honed that in, that's going to be reserved for a mastermind class because it's so layered, man. It's so much more. It's deeper. It's just more comprehensive. And so this 8-week principle model is a massive introduction to masculinity in contemporary times, still with a massive amount of substance and meaning, just different. And so the introduction of that is different. So that's July 17th. And to work with me, you can just jump on my website, stephanossafandos.com.
Yeah, and that's open for individual work as well, or you only?
Absolutely. No. I do a lot of individual work, definitely. Yeah, and it's interesting. My one-on-one clientele, I work more with women than I do with men. Just ever so slightly though.
Yeah. Well, mate, speaking of your interest in the Sacred Union, I loving the artwork that you guys you post on social media. I don't know who your artist is or where you're getting these pics from, but awesome stuff that you're finding.
Thank you.
Even your interpretation of everything. It's
yeah.
stuff.
I appreciate that, man. Yeah. So the pics, I just find them wherever I find them, and if I know who the artist is, I'll reference them. Otherwise, I just don't know who they are, so I can't reference them. But there's some people are talented, man, artistically, in that sense. And I see an image and it stimulates something within me, and I then just express about it. It's more of a download, it's something working through me than me going there,
Yeah, well, that happens when you're writing. Sometimes that's the power of the pen with the page and tapping into the subconscious and connecting a little deeper. I know that when I was writing my book, there were some days where I might be writing for 6 or 7 hours straight, and it'd feel like maybe an hour and a half. Get in the zone. But mate, thank you so much for your time and your insight. Before I get you to finish these sentences, as we do with every episode here on Heart House Radio, I wanted to just leave the platform here, the stage for you for a second. Any parting words for guys that are going through either a big transition or they've had a massive wake-up call, just to help build maybe their trust within themselves and their confidence?
Brothers, just be willing to look at your stuff, be willing to traverse the difficulty, be willing to traverse the pain, be willing to be challenged, be willing to look at your fears, be willing to open your heart, be willing to love, be willing to be present, be willing to redefine yourself as a man, be willing to open your heart to the people in your life that you care about, to your lover, to your partner, to your beloved, to your children, to your friends, to life. Just be fucking willing, full stop.
I love that you use the word willing, because at the end of the day, mate, you can, willingness is everything.
It is.
And you know what? It's never too late to change. Whoever's listening out there as well. Start now. Start today.
Yeah.
Stefanos, finish these sentences for me, mate.
Yeah.
A real man knows
himself.
I believe in
willingness.
Releasing fear gives me the freedom to
be myself.
The best advice I ever received:
be willing.
When I stand in my truth,
I feel free.
I'll never forget.
Oh, there's always room for growth and expansion.
And last one, I'm so happy I
have found my path.
Mate, there is no greater feeling that inner freedom. Stefanos, thank you so much again. Co-creators and allies, it has been a slice. We'll see you all again next week. Say goodbye, mate.
Thank you, brother. Goodbye, guys.
Yeah, bye.
Thank you once again for tuning into the Heart House Radio podcast. Don't forget to rate and review the show on iTunes to help this baby grow. I truly love and appreciate all your support. For more information about the show and my products and services, come on over to marshalldunn.com, or you can email me directly at marshall@marshalldunn.com. Thanks again, and we'll see you all next week.